Good afternoon. It's quite difficult to present after lunch. But anyway, I'll try to make sure that you don't sleep. I had two slides, but as people were talking, I kept on adding them. The tragedy of being in humanities. um, so I had not intended to introduce myself, but because Alet did so, I'll try to do that. So who am I? I teach journalism at the University of Eswatini, in the Kingdom of Eswatini. I'm happy to hear that there are conversations around Siswati, and I'm happy Muzi is listening. And we're going to be having a Siswati translation model very soon from Northwest. We urgently need that so that we can start thinking of generative AI in Siswati for our primary school kids. I'm also a research associate at the University of Limpopo. I've been involved in a number of data journalism projects where we have been training reporters on data journalism in the region, Lesotho, Botswana. And maybe something that is more relevant to us is the DigiMethods Africa MOOC and handbook that we are developing together with Alet. It's a handbook that's meant to benefit all of us. We're also anticipating that you'll be contributing towards this particular work. We are going to make it live on GitHub, and please, once we circulate on Slack that it's now up, please, you are welcome to contribute to that page and make it more meaningful. We are trying to develop resources for media scholars, but that doesn't sideline other humanities disciplines. My research centers on primarily climate change communication, and I've tried to incorporate digital methods and social media studies into this. And as part of that work, we have just finished the book that you see there that we have tried to do on digital and social media in Africa. Earlier in the morning, I heard people talk about the power, the politics of digital media. That book tries to address issues of technology inequality, materiality, and political economy within the African continent. And lastly, I just want to make a call that we are currently actively looking for partners to help us develop a tool, a very beautiful platform that is going to enable humanities scholars to scrape and analyze digital media data, so from newspapers to social media. There is a grant that we have, and we are trying to push boundaries, and deliberately we are going to universities that ordinarily are marginalized. And I'm speaking to a room of universities in the north, and I'm saying if you're interested in developing, you don't have to be a software engineer, you just have to be interested. And we have a slot for 3 more people, and we are going to have a community of practice, something that we'll also be sharing very soon. And we have discussed the possibility of funding 2 to 3 people to attend the DigiMethods summer school at Rhodes from that community of practice funding that we have. So you're welcome to join us in this conversation, and we are more than willing to have you on board. Then I had prepared a presentation, but I had to change in the morning as I listened to people talk. And I just want to, in the next 3 minutes, talk about the state of digital methods in humanities and social sciences. Something that I felt there was need for us to highlight on that and maybe justify the reason why this is important. Why are we here? Alet asked us that question in the morning. Why are we all here? And so we have tried to collect a data set that tries to map digital methods in humanities across the world, and from there we try and see the scenarios in Africa. From 1982 to 2023, from 328 journals, we have 1,294 articles. That's just the summary. This is the search string that we use to come up with the papers. And we realized that there is a lot of interest in digital methods from around the year 2010. And we can see that there is a spike in 2022, which means that the field is growing. But the question is, where is this change happening? This pie chart tries to give you an idea of the countries that are doing a lot of work in terms of digital humanities and doing research using computational methods. We do not, I'm trying to see, there is no African country that is in that top 10, and that is worrying, isn't it? So that is why we are here, so that we share experiences and we begin these meaningful collaborations. Maybe in 20 years' time, I'm quite hopeful that in 20 years' time, this should change, isn't it? We should have, South Africa, I'm not for that idea, but South Africa is led, isn't it? Let's have more articles coming from South Africa, but also showing collaborations across the region. It's my wish that we turn this chart into something that is positive for us. Again, I'm trying to represent that again in this particular chart. Again, there's nothing that we're producing from the continent. The countries that seem to be getting more citations from digital humanities research, they are there. Again, we don't feature. Then this is what is the most important part of this particular map. As much as there's a lot of research happening, it bypasses Africa. And I'm happy that all the people that I'm seeing here, the people that I saw in the Eastern Cape in December, and the people that were in KZN are going to change this. We're going to begin to see quite a different scenario from our region, and we have a lot of meaningful papers and collaborations on that. Then going back to my actual presentation that I was asked to do, I'll try to be quick. Data in humanities and social sciences. Aled and other presenters have already talked a lot about data, so I'll try not to repeat what has been said, but I just want to give you an idea of the amount of data that is being produced each day. So this particular slide, for example, tells us that we send 333 billion emails per day. I'm talking about the generation of data, and maybe starting to think of why we should be worried or why should we be interested as people in humanities. The Internet of Things, our phones, our computers, our refrigerators, our washing machines are producing massive amounts of data, and we need to be thinking about what does this mean for us people in humanities. I tend to have a jacket that is very contradictory. I'm from humanities on the left side, and that's my traditional discipline, but I'm also from digital transformation on the other, a side that sort of champions all these things that are good about data. But we need to be cautious about this. We won't stop this, so there's no need to attempt to say, how do we stop the generation of massive amounts of data? It's happening. We're in a data-driven society. Maybe we just need to know how do we critique and respond to what is changing around us. So the amount of data that we're producing produces what Aled called data ubiquity. And I define it as the daily generation of massive amounts of data through our digital interactions. So we are the people that produce the data, even though we don't own it. That's a point for those that are interested in the political economics of data, something that I'm not going to be talking to and about today. And I provide a question to say, imagine if every word ever written in history was 1 grain of sand, how much storage space do you think would need today to keep them? You don't have to answer it now, but to move towards my point, I make reference to Noah Harari. He's quite a popular author. I disagree with most of his conclusions in terms of life and our future, but it's good to learn from those that you don't agree with. He talks in this book about what he calls dataism and data religion. And he makes a very serious warning that if we do not take data seriously, the world is going to be governed by people that are going to be capable of managing this data and use it to manipulate whatever system is available, either for profit or for power. And if us in humanities are not in the map, we won't be there to provide the much needed watchdog role that we need to be providing for the sustenance of the democracy that we at least still have. It's already broken, but we still need to fight towards that. So I disagree with his philosophical points, but I need to maybe emphasize that if we do not take note and begin to critique this and use this data to try and criticize the system itself, we'll be left out. And we can only criticize if we know what we're talking about. We have to be inside, isn't it? We have to know what big data is. We have to know where it is stored, what is it being used for. Sometimes we get lost and begin to be on that side, like myself. That's why I said I'm contradicted, because I also want to use data to improve journalism, and that means utilizing the data for good, but that is critiqued on the other side. So we need to be careful that those that will be able to manage the data, we have elections in South Africa, I think in May, and the parties that are going to be able to use the data at their disposal are likely going to have better campaigns. I'm not talking about the campaigns at rallies, but they're going to have a much better way of appealing to their audiences through social media, targeted campaigns, and we might see bad people winning. I don't know who are the bad people. It's not my space to comment, but we might see bad people that are not democratic winning, and we need to be cautious. So enough of worrying you about that. So we are seeing the threats to democracy, and there's a way of thinking about this. Think of the 2016 American elections, where Cambridge Analytica was able to utilize massive amounts of data, and it has not been proven that it's the 11,000 Facebook messages that changed the electoral landscape, but we at least can speculate that the people that made Trump to win were not the majority. And these are people that were reached through Facebook. And this was possible because Cambridge Analytica was able to understand the people, was able to understand their sentiment, and they were able to package their messages in a way that resonated with their aspirations. And Trump won. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, that's democracy, isn't it? But we know that Trump was elected the president. But my point is that it was because of the understanding that a particular company had about the data that they had. So data becomes that meaningful new oil that is in the hands of those who can make use of it. And as humanities scholars, we need to catch up and understand the data society and offer the much needed criticism that sometimes we do not offer. Sometimes we complain that we are not in natural sciences, so this is not our space, but it is our space, and my role today is to talk about opportunity. Of course, not in terms of profit, but in terms of what we can do and the possibilities that are there. So the goal here is to demystify the use of data for scholars and begin to think about how powerful it is for us to use data-driven research approaches and complement them with traditional ways of doing research. And from doing that, we could be able to come up with more conclusions that are more meaningful, but without sidelining the space to those that we think no. Why should we worry about this? Alette has already talked about this. So I've also mentioned this before, that our subjects have gone digital, and thus we need to follow them and begin to speak to the platforms that they share their experiences in. Just as a way of maybe encouragement, data allows us to see the bigger picture, to find patterns and systems that shape our cultures and behaviors. I'm talking as a dataist now, as someone who is on the other side, but trying to let you know that you can still be able to see the bigger picture even though you want to criticize at the end. So you can still use the same methods and be able to go to digitized museum archives, oral histories, government reports, news stories. I work mostly with news stories and social media posts. But there is space for everyone in humanities to engage in this. When we're dealing with the definitions, we're wondering, so is this that really digital humanities? Is this one not? And we found from the definition that we got that all of us, we have somewhere to fit. So it's not exclusive. So we need to occupy our spaces from our different domains, sometimes to try and partner and collaborate. Forgive me, but I have no idea how to define transdisciplinary research, multidisciplinary research, and make a difference about. I've never attempted. I always think that there is too much time wasted trying to understand these deep concepts, and maybe what was needed, like an elder said, was just a way of talking about something. But if we combine whether it's transdisciplinary, it's multidisciplinary, but there is something that we can do. We can combine someone who's doing languages. Tebo was talking about code switching, speech recognition, something that I'm interested in as someone in media studies, because I want to be able to use whatever it comes up with in studying social media posts and to be able to understand sentiment and to do topic modeling. So I'm so much looking forward to whatever that they're going to produce. At least from their research, I know that we're going to be able to understand social media from the viewpoint of CPED, for example. Something that at the moment we can't do. We're trying to map people's reaction towards load shedding. And we had to drop all non-English words. But now, because of the research that we're seeing from there is a possibility to now know that something's happening at UL. There is a possibility that something's being done at Venda, and we're able to all come together and do research that makes sense. So I'm talking about the possibility of partnerships. Those in history, and journalism, we're always twins, so we can always work together. But let's try and explore the opportunities and try to use them. And I make a point that a single research project can draw from multiple data types, something that I just mentioning, comparing public reaction to an event, for example, load shedding, or the 2021 protests after Jacob Zuma was sent to prison. We use news articles that are textual, social media that is textual, visual, and sometimes we use images that are shared online to try and understand the reactions that we're getting from the people during the unrest, or whether people actually liked Zuma going to prison, or social media users were against Jacob Zuma going to prison. It's something that would be interesting. Someone tries to engage with the debate around MK and whether Zuma should be excluded. We don't have to be lawyers, isn't it? But we can try and measure public sentiment. What are people saying about whether Zuma deserves to be on the ballot or not? Our job as researchers is to observe, isn't it? We need to try and tell the story as it happens. So what are people saying about it? Where is the sentiment? And what does that mean? And we can only be able to do that provided we have managed to capture the languages that are necessary. For at the moment, whatever we're doing it using English. In my code, I drop everything that is not English because I just don't have the capacity to study anything else that is not English because the dictionaries are not available. So let's partner those who can develop the indigenous languages, tell us, we come and use the resources, we also give you what we've produced, and in that way we change that other map and make digital humanities feature better. We can also, I've talked about sentiment analysis. You can think of Russia and their bot farms. It's quite interesting how they managed to invest so much in trying to sway public opinion here in terms of the war that they waged against Ukraine. But we can measure that on social media by trying to follow particular accounts, measure particular sentiment, and actually see whether the sentiment is coming from legit people or is coming from bots or is coming from particular echo chambers. Then for those in linguistics, you could compare patterns in love letters. Those were born during the time of writing letters. Whether there is changing social relationships in terms of what we actually see in the letters. From maybe 1950, we see patterns of change in terms of how people were engaging, in terms at least of their relationships, over maybe 5 decades. What was changing, what was being dropped, what was being picked. So we can use data centers research to try and track word usage in novels to identify subtle shifts of social attitudes, changing use of gendered terms. We can map geographic settings of popular fiction to examine representations of place, something that is obviously, I think, close to most of us, the discussion and discourse around space. Use online book reviews to analyze audience reception patterns. I'm close. We can use social network analysis to map relationships within online communities. I've talked about this. Track social media language to detect emerging social movements. Analyze economic and demographic data to visualize disparities between communities. And I make a point at the end of this slide that data does not replace traditional methods like close reading, critical analysis, but we should always view it as something that complements it. So there is always a fear, and I can tell you, whenever a student is defending their proposal and they try to go in this direction, they're often reminded, we are in humanities, please. This does not belong here. Maybe, I'm happy we have many professors here and senior academics. Maybe this has to change and begin to allow our students to be more innovative and see the value in the researches that they are producing. I'm sure the students that are here, as they go back, maybe you are going to be refining your proposals, incorporate maybe text mining, those that are going to be attending the text mining workshops. Maybe you see that there is value in including text mining. How do you present that to your supervisor who has never heard of text mining? So you need to also be diplomatic how you present it, isn't it? I know of a case of a student who had these innovative approaches, then they were told, but when human sciences, we don't use this. Where did you get this from? And unfortunately, they mentioned our names, and we end up having to pick the burden of course supervision. But it's something that we have to be willing to do so that the field grows, isn't it? So we always have to see this complementary role and understand that while in traditional, our fields have relied on methods like archival research, participant observation, textual analysis, we have seen these shifts and we need to start adopting these and begin to appreciate emerging scholars, established scholars and our students as they come up with new methods of doing research and begin to understand that there is power in understanding how to analyze large data sets. I'll give an example. I felt bad after finishing my thesis that I'd done so many stories manually. It was very painful. Someone had introduced me to digital methods when I was doing my analysis. I would have finished my PhD a year earlier. But because I was doing everything manually, it took me more time. And now I think I'm an expert, but I'm an expert in doing things that are not necessary. I feel bad about it because I don't want another student to go through that. If we can, we need to try and change the way we approach research. Then in terms of the tools that are available, I make an argument that it has to be more about learning the methods and the rationale of analysis rather than trying to master these techniques. I'll give an example. In 2022, around June, we're all trying to learn hard coding. Then ChatGPT came in November 2022. It got improved last year. It's getting more improved. So we need to be knowing the reasons behind doing particular things more. So I think we need to go back to theory a little bit to understand why are we doing this? What is the value of doing this? Then go to the tool as a way of trying to automate the process and fast track it. So my argument, though debatable, is that tools will always come, but the reason why we do research more or less remains the same. So I've tried to put a list of available tools for data collection and analysis. I want to talk about basic Excel sheets, Google Sheets. We can use this for basic analysis. We have free tools for visualization. Those that are going to be attending, I think, is workshop 3. We'll be talking about these tools, raw graphs, data rep, and Kepi, how this can be used in terms of visualizing our data. We also have advanced tools such as R and Python that you can turn to. And Python is good for data manipulation and analysis. I'm not an expert in Python, so don't bring any Python issue towards me. I understand R better, but there are things that you find that you now need to do them in Python. So if there's anyone who is willing to teach me and really take me along, I'm willing to learn Python and code it better, because in our platform that we're building, we've realized that we need to be using Python as our primary language. So I'm willing to learn, and I'll be joining. I'm hoping we're going to have a group after this where we're going to be able to do that. Then I won't talk much about the other things, but just the possibilities through these tools and techniques. We can do text analysis, we can do network analysis, and then in terms of sources, we can use government websites, open data portals, digitized archives, social media platforms, newspaper websites, and I think Tepi has already talked about some of these platforms and how they're trying to get their data. And lastly, I want to just say that data is not neutral, and as academics, we still need to remain ethical, isn't it? in terms of how we collect and use this data, anonymize it, etc. So we must always think about how we use the data that we collect and how this could impact people. And I make a point that ethical thinking is not a roadblock, but it makes research stronger, not weaker. So if we ground our research in strong ethical reasoning, then we have a chance of doing better things with that research. Thank you very much.